seconds, it didn't seem like a lot, but if you were to try to hold your breath for that long, it would seem like a long time. So glad you're here. Last week we were out of town, so a happy new year to all of you. So glad you're here. Hopefully when you come here, you feel like you've found home. This is a place where you can connect with people, do life with people. And we don't care who you are, where you've been, what you've done, who you've done it with. We're thrilled that you are here and that you get to be a part of this experience, which I hope by the time it's over, you'll be glad that you came. Did you know that if you eat yeast and shoe polish every night before going to bed, when you wake up, you'll rise and shine? Lovers, there's a new sushi place opening up just for lawyers. It's called Sosumi. See, Jake didn't give you that last week, so and he didn't wear a suit either. So we were sad about that, but apparently he did get a new leather jacket, so that's cool. Yeah, we're glad you're here today. Listen, you might feel exhausted. You might feel like you are just overwhelmed, overscheduled, anxious, dissatisfied with your life. Those are the kind of things that many of us experience, and it has nothing to do with age. It's not an age thing, it's not an income thing, it's not a political thing, it's not a marital status thing, it's not a male-female thing. It's just a thing that we all have to deal with, or that we deal with in life. And so, since that's an issue, then we probably should address it, myself included. And maybe we need to simplify our lives. Thus, the title of this brand new series called Simple Life. Living a simple life doesn't come naturally to us. Some of us might not even think we can do it. You might hear somebody talk about a simple life and like, listen, I'm not Amish. What do you expect? Well, speaking of Amish, this past Wednesday evening, when we were in Pennsylvania, it's a town called Reeversburg, Pennsylvania. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's just farm country, and it's predominantly Amish. And about, 8-9 years ago, we found out that there's a family there that will actually entertain guests for dinner in an Amish home. So we did that 8 or 9 years ago, and I tracked a number down and found out how to get that set up this time. So on Wednesday evening, my family and my sister and her husband and daughter, we went there. If you read much, there's a series of books that my wife has read that has to do with Amish people, and when we found out that this family's last name is Yoder, she said, well, of course it's Yoder, Jonas Yoder. So these people live in a farmhouse with no electricity. They run their stove and the refrigerator off of propane, and they've got candles in the windows. They heat the house with wood. They've actually made some strides in the last 9 years. Have you ever seen one of those like a DeWalt tool that's a flashlight, battery-operated flashlight thing? Okay, so they have a couple of these hanging in their house, and I asked them, so how do you get away with that? It's because they charge them with solar. So it's kind of interesting, but these are horse and buggy people. Right? They don't own a car. They don't farm with tractors. He said sometimes when it's a big job, they'll team up 8 draft horses. So they had this Belgium horse there that we saw. This thing that's middle of its back is taller than me, and she's only 2 years old. So imagine something a little bit bigger than that. 8 of those pulling plows through the ground. And it's just very, very cool. And, the mom, she's, these people are now retired, but, mom's dressed in her full Amish attire. And it's just a fascinating lifestyle to me. I'm not sure I could live that every day, but I think it'd be fun to try for a week. I'd be scared to death on a horse and buggy when there's traffic zipping down the road at 55, 65 miles an hour, passing horse and buggies. But anyway, a very, very, very cool thing. And so we talked about the life of the Amish, and he said, my family's been here for 9 generations, and we've kind of practiced this lifestyle for a few hundred years. A lifestyle that is simple, as he described it. It was simple. And it's all about God, and it's all about family. Actually, they have church in homes. They rotate homes, but they only meet together corporately every other week, so that on the off weeks, it's all about family getting together. And when they do church, they all bring a dish and they have a meal together. So starting next Sunday, we don't have time for all of us to eat, so just bring a dish, and I'll take care of it a little bit later, okay? So anyways, the simplicity of life there is very, very intriguing to me. But, our lives seem to be all about more. It seems to be about more, being more successful, being more efficient, being more adept, being more available. It's just more, and more. And I think it's this pursuit of more that is making us feel exhausted and overwhelmed. It's overscheduling us. It's making us feel anxious and dissatisfied. But simple life is about more than just doing less. It's being who God called us to be, with a wholehearted, single-minded focus on Him. It's walking away from innumerable opportunities in favor of the few which we've been called to and which we've been created for. And it's a lifestyle that allows us at the end of the day, when we rest our head on a pillow, that we can reflect with gratitude that we invested our time and energy and money and whatever else in the type of life that God wanted us to invest in. But sadly, our overcomplicated lives probably feel somewhat normal to us. So when I go into the home of an Amish family, I just feel like, oh my goodness, that is so abnormal. But then they're looking at me thinking, oh my goodness, that is so abnormal. Right? We just sort of do the same old kind of things over and over again, and it just becomes normal to us. We accept it as normal. We get accustomed to life at a frantic pace. Wouldn't you agree that life has kind of gotten out of control? And then I'm not sure we're able to discriminate between what's important and what is actually unessential. We squander away our one and only life doing things that don't really matter. We sacrifice the things that do matter for the things that don't. And maybe you are craving a more simple life, anchored by the priorities and anchored in the priorities that matter most. And if that's you, I think over the next few weeks, we'll roll up our sleeves and we'll get to work at this and try to untangle ourselves from an overscheduled and overwhelming life that really requires more than just reorganizing our closets or cleaning out our junk drawers. Does everybody else have a junk drawer? Isn't that's like an American thing? Apple pie, ice cream, and junk drawers. Those are like things that all Americans have. It's really about uncluttering our lives, and to seek to live life to the full. Because that's what Jesus promised. Look with me in John 10:10, where Jesus says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Now my question is that the life you're living? Is that the life you're living? I'm guessing it's probably not. It's probably more like the devil, the thief, the devil is luring us into this hectic kind of living that ultimately exhausts us and overwhelms us. But if we're going to live life to the full, you're going to have to simplify to live the kind of life that God is inviting you to live. Now, I think about Jesus and his ministry to people over these 3 years doing ministry, the hundreds or thousands of people that he encountered and dealt with, and even the number of people that he dealt with on a daily basis. Eventually he had his 12 disciples. But of that 12, there were 3 that were sort of in his inner circle: Peter, James, and John. And then there were some others. There were other people. There were 3 others that weren't his 12 disciples, but Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, siblings, that were very close friends of Jesus. Supporters of him, probably prayed for him, encouraged him, all of this kind of thing, and actually provided a place for him to sort of retreat to at times. They lived in a suburb of Jerusalem called Bethany. The city still exists today, and from time to time, like I said, they opened their home up and extended hospitality to Jesus and his guys. And this one incident that I want us to look at today, Jesus was involved in ministry and things were growing and people were coming, and it seems like things were increasing and things were kind of on a roll. There were probably more healings, more miracles, more of everything that he could offer, and his days became increasingly packed and his schedule was full. But occasionally he would call a timeout and retreat to the serenity of the guest quarters there at his friend's place in Bethany. And maybe there he would wind down for a day or two and get refreshed and get replenished. And it's this story that Jesus gives us and Luke records for us as Jesus interacts with a couple of people in this home in Bethany. In Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 38, the Bible says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. You can kind of see the dynamics of this, and probably a word picture forms in your mind as you think about these 2 sisters and their interaction with Jesus. I don't know that Jesus had phoned ahead to tell them that he was coming. I don't know that they had a week or two's advance notice that he was coming, but probably more than likely they had the kind of relationship that he could pop in when he felt like it. On this one occasion, he does that, he stops in for a visit. And Mary decides that she's going to pull up a chair and sit next to him and sort of engage him in conversation. I don't know what the conversation was exactly, but I'm guessing that she probably said something like, Jesus, I'm so glad that you stopped by. I mean, how's it been going on the road, you know? How have those pain-in-the-neck Pharisees been treating you? I mean, you can tell us we're friends, and what you share in Bethany stays in Bethany, you know. So I see her kind of interacting with him on that level. While Martha, on the other hand, has busied herself back in the kitchen preparing a meal. She's frantically trying to be an accommodating hostess, trying to tend to the needs of Jesus and his disciples, probably preparing appetizers and entrees and drinks, etc. And then shortly it begins to irritate her that Mary's simply lounging in the other room with Jesus, catching up on the latest events. And after a while, she snaps. She loses it. Now, maybe she's made a few subtle attempts to try to get her sister's attention. You know how that is, right? Maybe she peeked around the corner and gave Mary that stink eye look that says, get your butt in here and help. Maybe she purposely dropped a few dishes or pots and pans so that maybe that would get Mary's attention and she would come in to help, but all to no avail. And at one point, Martha bursts into the room and interrupts this conversation between Mary and Jesus. But if you're looking at the story, you'll notice that Martha does not address her sister Jesus. Martha instead addresses Jesus directly and openly says to him, Lord, don't you care? Now, when I read that, I'm thinking, seriously, you're kidding me. Don't you care? I mean, she is addressing the creator of this universe. She's addressing this one who has left heaven and moved into the neighborhood. She is addressing this one who has performed miracles and healings and done tremendous things to this point in his life. And she's addressing the one that is actually going to offer himself up for the redemption of humanity, including her and her sister. And yet she still asks, don't you care? I can almost picture Martha walking into the room with a spoon, some kind of a utensil. And she's upset, and she walks in and gets right up to Jesus. And I imagine her saying to him, you tell that lazy sister of mine to get her big butt in the kitchen to help out, right? Now, what's interesting is that Jesus doesn't escalate the conflict, does he? I mean, if you and I were Jesus, we would have probably told Martha what she could do with the spoon. But Jesus doesn't do anything such as that. He just tries to calm things down, and twice he just simply says, Martha, Martha. You remember how it was as a kid when your mother used your full name? Yeah, that's probably about how Martha felt at that moment. Martha, Martha. In other words, calm down, Martha. Take a chill pill, it's going to be okay. And with genuine kindness, he makes this observation. He says, you are worried and upset about many things. He can tell that she's overwhelmed and that she's overscheduled and that she's exhausted. Really the same kinds of things that would define our culture as well. And he invites her to put down her spoon and take a couple of deep breaths. He says, so many things are occupying your mind right now. They're churning you up inside. And you're making my visit with you much more complicated than I intended it to be. I picture Jesus at this moment kind of clarifying the lines and taking advantage of a teachable moment for everyone in the room. I think he's in essence saying, Martha, can I simplify something for you? Whenever I stop by, it's really not for the food, even though you're a wonderful cook. I mean, if I wanted a 5-star dinner, I could have arranged for one. I just fed 5,000 people a couple of weeks ago, you know. And I made some awesome Chardonnay at a wedding reception once. I could arrange for food and drink anywhere, anytime. But when I stop by here, it's for friendship, it's for connection, it's to be with you. I come here for the life-giving and the life-exchanging engagement, the fellowship. That's what I'm here for, really. And in Luke's text, Jesus tells Martha something that I too, and maybe you too, often need to be reminded of. Few things are needed, he said. Indeed, only one. You see, Martha was missing out on what mattered most. She didn't quite get it, whereas Mary did. Jesus says that Mary has actually chosen what is better. And I will not take that away from her, he says. In other words, I will not send Mary into the kitchen to do a dozen other things that don't really matter in the big picture. You need to simplify things and focus on what really matters. Set down your spoon and pull up a chair and let's be together. I think we all long for an antidote to our busyness. And that antidote isn't probably making sure you get everything done in the kitchen or making sure you get everything done in the office. The antidote sometimes requires us to leave some things undone in order to sit down and have an unrushed conversation with Jesus. Now, I don't know how you approach that story. It's a very short story, really, verse 38 through 42 of Luke 10, but it is a very intriguing, but it is a very convicting story as well. And in those few words, Jesus teaches us some of his values and some of what he sees as priorities. And one of his greatest priorities is relationship with him. Don't get so busy. Don't allow yourself to get so exhausted with everything going on in life that you are missing out on what is important. Conversation with me. Unrushed, unhurried time alone with me. Some of us have probably learned the hard way how important it is to not allow ourselves to get completely exhausted. And when you decide that you never want to live on empty again, that's when you start paying attention to the replenishment side of the equation. If you're going to choose to live with more energy reserves in your life, you're probably going to disappoint a few people along the way who demand your time from you. And you're going to have to fight to keep your life replenished. It's no one else's responsibility but yours. And you kind of have to fight for that. You have to fight to protect your energy reserves and priorities. But simple life requires work. I've said that already. And part of the process is to be totally open and honest. I mean, consider the questions, how depleted are you? I mean, as you sit here right now, like, how depleted are you? Are you the person sitting there that you're thinking, I am so exhausted? I'm just glad I get to sit down here for a few minutes and I don't have to do anything else but just focus on this. How long has it been since you felt replenished, when you felt energized? See, a lot of us feel exhausted. And it took about everything we could muster up just to get up and get our butts into gear and get here today because we are so exhausted. But wouldn't it be amazing if we could say, no, I am fully energized, you know? Luis is probably the one person that, is like the Energizer bunny. And what you don't know about Luis is that he turned, you're not going to believe this, but he turned 72 yesterday. I don't think anybody would have believed you were that age. I mean, we thought you were at least 78 or 79, but no, I'm just kidding. We all thought you were probably 60-ish. So that's pretty good. Now, wouldn't you rather wake up in the morning fully energized instead of completely exhausted? I mean, let me ask it this way. How full is your bucket? If this bucket represents your life, how full is this bucket? Or are you depleted? You know, is your bucket empty that there's just nothing left? Or is your bucket completely full? I think what Jesus was trying to tell Martha was that her only hope was to pull up a chair and unplug from all the busyness and to begin a conversation with the one who could restore her frenetic heart and settle her spirit and get her heading back to what is true north. And the same may be true for you. What does it feel like for you when your bucket, your energy bucket, is filled to the brim? And what does that feel like for you? What does it feel like when you are filled up with God, when you're connected to Jesus Christ, when things in your family are running on all cylinders, when your schedule is sane, when you're eating right and exercising and sleeping properly? What does that feel like? How does it feel to be filled up and replenished? You see, I think that's probably when you feel your best. Maybe that's when you feel the presence of God more consistently in your life, or you're more attentive to the whispers of the Holy Spirit. Or maybe that's when you love your spouse and family well, or maybe that's when you make better decisions about your schedule. Or maybe that's when you make better food and rest choices. Maybe that's when you're ready to go to work for God. Maybe that's when you are filled up, you are experiencing the fullness that Jesus spoke about in John 10:10. But think about the times when you were depleted, like toxically depleted, when your bucket was empty and you had absolutely nothing left. I think it's times like that when we feel resentment. People whose buckets are empty, people whose buckets are completely depleted, resent others, such as Martha coming out of the kitchen with her wooden spoon, trying to get her sister Mary in there to help her. She was resentful. Thus, her conversation with Jesus, "Don't you care? Can you not get my sister off her lazy butt and in the kitchen to help do something?" When you're completely depleted, you feel irritated. Everything irritates you. Something happens, it doesn't even have to be that bad, and it sets you off. That's when you snap at your spouse. That's when you lose your temper at work. That's when you're kicking the dog. That's when some kind of withdraw and become passive. That's when some turn to overeating or overdrinking or overmedicating or overworking. Sometimes we get depleted and we just scatter. We lose our ability to focus. We jump from one distraction to the next with little to show for it. We confuse motion with progress. Some of us, when we get depleted, we escape. We escape into books or movies or TV, or we waste hour upon hour trolling Facebook or Pinterest or Instagram, thinking that other people's lives are better than our own. Some overspend. Some get so depleted they think the way to fix that is to get a credit card and go to the mall. Some turn to pornography. But I think it's safe to say that none of us are at our best when we are depleted. I thought of it like this: the closer your bucket gets to empty, the easier it is for exhausted you to kick the bucket. I'm talking almost literally. But the closer your bucket gets to full, the easier it is for energized you to live life to the full. So where are you at with energy level in your bucket? Is God saying to you, hey, listen, I think you need to put down the spoon. I think you need to take a step or two back. And I think we just need to sit down together and talk. Because we've got some things to work out. Somewhere along the way, you've lost a connection with me. You've lost your bearings of what's true north, and now you're just spinning. But I have a better plan, a plan that can refill your bucket. So what kind of things fill your bucket? What refuels you? What activities or engagements restore your energy levels? I mean, what do you need to do to start pouring new streams of replenishment into your badly depleted life? Now, one of the problems with this is that some of us in this room are going to feel guilty. You might know what that feels like when you even consider taking time for yourself. You feel guilty that you're not doing something for someone else. But when your tank is empty, you don't really have anything else to give to anybody. You can't give what you don't have. So engaging in replenishment activities is not a form of selfish entertainment. It's vital to the end goal of living your one and only life at its best. So don't be apologetic about it. Prioritize and protect these replenishment streams in your life. You can't expect anybody else to do it but you. It's your responsibility. You've got to do it, and you've got to protect those things. So I want to talk about 6 bucket-filling streams that I think can help to take you from a depleted life to where your tank is full to the brim and overflowing. For example, number 1, connecting to God. Connecting to God might be one of those things that will refill and replenish your bucket. I don't know how many of you have ever been to Rome, to the Vatican, and more particularly into the Sistine Chapel to view Michelangelo's painting on the ceiling, the painting called The Creation of Adam. It's that one. This painting portrays God and Adam with their hands outstretched toward one another, as you can see. It's as if God is leaning and straining toward Adam, and his fingertip almost touches Adam's hand. But if you notice, Adam's hand is a little bit more relaxed, as if he's not nearly as intent on the mission as God is. It's the very hand of heaven reaching for the hand of humanity. Now imagine if Michelangelo would have painted this a little bit differently. What if Adam's hand reached out another few inches and had grabbed firmly a hold of God's hand and was hanging on to that hand tightly? That's the image I want you to fix in your mind, because I think that's the image that would capture the single biggest bucket filler for your life. That is being firmly hand in hand with God. For me, when I feel God's love, when the Holy Spirit is bubbling within my spirit, and when I'm in conversation with him throughout the day, and when I am able to hear his whispers, when I'm trying to be present and responsive to him, when I'm really in a dialed-in relationship with God, that's the single most replenishing dynamic in my life, and I believe it would be for yours too. And being right with God and tuned into him and walking close with him actually simplifies life. Now, you might be sitting here today and you've never really connected with God to begin with. And you're listening to this and you realize that there's something deep in the core of your life that has really not taken hold of God. But I would encourage you to reach your hand out to his hand and to know that he loves you and he's reaching his hand to you, and he will grasp any humbled hand that comes his way. Now, maybe you've not reached your hand out, maybe you've pulled it back. But today could be the day that you apologize to him and for your wanderings, and you stick out your hand and you say to him, God, I need you in my life. And that's when I believe he will become your replenishing force. Because the power of God on a human life is a game changer. Many of us in the room have experienced that. But if you're not in the daily habit of reaching for God's hand and listening for his agenda, here's just a practical thing that you might consider doing. Find a spot in your home, wherever it is for you. For me, it's, for Cindy and I, it's a love seat in our front room. And sit there for at least 15 minutes a day, connecting with God. Reading his word. Open up your life and listen for his whispers. And I think when you're in that place and he's speaking into your life, it
it simplifies life because it helps you to discard those things that are not really important to be able to focus on the thing that is. You see, that's what I think Jesus was saying to Martha. You've got to push away the things that really don't matter. And for some of you, it might be the dishes. I've noticed this, and maybe you've noticed this. Every time you want to spend time with God, all of a sudden there's about 35 things that pop up in your mind that you feel like you need to do. And the truth of the matter is, you weren't going to do those anyway, at that particular moment at least. Right, but the minute you can sit down, he can help you to push aside those things that really don't matter, to focus in on what does matter. It might mean you got to cut out some other stuff. It might mean you got to get up a few minutes early. It might mean that you need to stay up a few minutes late. But at some point in time, you've got to have this time to connect with him. Now, I understand some of you, you don't like to read. You're not really a reader. Some of you don't like to sit, and that's okay, but you've got to find what works for you. Because maybe what works for you is a walk out in nature. And that's where you need to be, outside, walking and communing with God. Maybe for you, it's music, and you've got to have music on, and you've created this worship experience, whether it's when you're in the car, or when you're on a walk, or when you're in your front room. For others of you, it's maybe solitude. You just want to be alone and every noise and distraction removed so that you can hear him. But all of us have to find that thing and that way that we can keep hand in hand with God, our hand in his. A second replenisher for me is engaging in church. Engaging in church. If you're like me, coming on a weekly basis is something that certainly is replenishing, and if I'm not there, there's something missing. Now, last Sunday we were at a Hillsong, New York, so we were in a church in New York, and the music was amazing, and the message was great, and the whole experience was very cool and very powerful. But the truth of the matter is, it wasn't like being with you. It wasn't like being with you as family. But when I come into this place, for me, it's worship that's energizing, it's teaching that's energizing, it's community that is energizing. It's you that is energizing to me. It's energizing and it's life-changing, and I hope it's the same for you as well. And that's why we need to make it a priority to be here. You see, if you allow your life to get so busy, when you're not here, there's something draining out of this bucket. A third thing that is energizing for me, and probably for you too, is family. Now, family might look different for all of us, but for me, family is, my wife, my daughter and her husband and their baby, and my son, and if you're on social media, you know that we're going to get a daughter-in-law here in the next few months, so... I always take it back to when she came here a few months ago, and I said, it's all up to you. I said, Alyssa, the pressure's on. If the family here at church thinks you're good enough, then we'll take you in. But most of you, truth of the matter is, most of you met her before we ever did, and we already knew from social media that you'd given a thumbs up before we ever met her. So my son, he's been considering doing this for quite a while. And I said, you're tormenting this poor girl because she probably thinks that she's going to get proposed to on Christmas. And he goes, well, I'd never do it on Christmas because she'd be expecting it. I said, she's probably going to expect then that it's going to be New Year's Eve. He said, well, I'd never do it on New Year's Eve because she'd probably be expecting that. And so he bought a ring, and we had it in our possession because they were flying to New York and we were flying to New York separately. And he didn't want the ring to be in a bag that would show up on a screen or have them pull out this box. And so we carried the goods. And so the plan was for Friday night at Rockefeller Center. There's an ice skating rink there. NBC, Today's Show films just across the corner. But, this humongous Christmas tree. Not quite as big. It was actually bigger than Carrie and Adam's, but probably not by much. But, this gigantic Christmas tree, and then there's this ice skating rink there. And so the plan is this proposal is going to come down on Friday evening. We're going to go there. They're going to pay the $40 a person to skate. Do I even need to tell you that there was no way I was going to do that? I don't even think you were asking that, were you? Because you knew better. So, it was all going to happen there, and we had dinner reservations at a nice restaurant for 7 o'clock, and they already knew this was going to be an engagement celebration and all, and so we show up at Rockefeller Center, and there's a Zamboni on the ice, and I asked this police officer there, where do you get in line for the skating? And he goes, oh, it's closed till 9:30 or 10 o'clock tonight because of a private party. I'm like, oh, great. Well, Alyssa's parents were not with us, and so they're in Modesto waiting for a FaceTime conversation, to be able to view their daughter getting engaged, and it's not going to happen, there. And so, we're on our way to the restaurant when I remember this is a dinner for an engagement celebration, and I'm like, Carrie! So she walks away and calls the restaurant and goes, no engagement. Now, you couldn't tell them the full story. They're probably thinking she said no. So we show up at the restaurant, and Adam goes in and says, it's a Jacob's party, blah, blah, blah. No engagement, So then the girl's leading us to the table, and I jump up there first, and I'm like, now remember, no mention of engagement here, right? She goes, okay, yeah, we got it. So anyways, the next day we go to Statue of Liberty, and I go, that'd be pretty cool, out in front of the Statue of Liberty or up in the Crown, you could do that. And he's like, nah. So we're on the boat ride back from Ellis Island back to Manhattan, and Carrie and I tell Wes when Alyssa went to the restroom, this is happening tonight. One way or another, either you're going to ask her or we're going to ask her. We can't continue this trip like this. I mean, it's stressful. When you know something and then when one of the 6 in your party doesn't know what the rest of you know, it's pretty stressful, So, and then amazingly, it stopped raining and we went back to the rink and it's open for business again and the line is short. So they get in line. And then we had the trouble of trying to make the handoff to give him the ring. That's a whole other story. But anyways, he eventually gets the ring, and so they finally get out on the ice, and Carrie's on one side of the rink at the railing videoing, and Adam's in another part videoing, and I'm in another part videoing, and Cindy is in another part FaceTiming Alyssa's parents and sister, and they're watching all of this, happen. So they get out onto the ice, and they just start skating. And Alyssa's sister starts counting how many laps they're doing. Before a proposal came, they skated 18 laps around that thing. My phone had already shown the battery's going to die very shortly, and same for Carrie's. And I was like, oh my goodness, you can't yell down, do it already. You just can't do that. So eventually I get to the corner of the rink and there's really nobody there. And then I can see what's about to happen because I don't know if you've ever tried to intentionally get down on a knee with ice skates, but it was something like, So anyways, he finally gets down and he was like, I just don't want to do this in front of a bunch of people. And I'm just like, And there's thousands of people on the rink and standing around there, and he goes, I don't want a bunch of people. And I'm like, okay, whatever, that's crazy. But anyways, he pulls out this box and he gives her this ring, and the thousands of people that are standing around have zeroed in on what's happening. And it erupted like yesterday's win at the Rams game. I mean, the crowd started hooping, hollering, whistling, cheering, and it was going crazy. And everybody on the skating rink has stopped, and they're all cheering. And I'm thinking, oh, it's so funny because this is the guy who didn't want a bunch of people around. And I'm standing up the rail, and I'm videoing too. And I'm not saying I had any tears going, but the lady standing next to me was looking at me and finally got the nerve to ask, do you know those people? I said, no, I get choked up at engagements all the time. I'm like, no, that's my son. So anyways, so that finally happened, and then, whoa, what a relief after that. So we could then enjoy the rest of the trip together. But, that's family, and who would have thought? I mean, those of you who are grandparents, you knew this, but I didn't know this, that how replenishing a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl could be. So family is replenishing, and maybe your family is completely screwed up, but I hope God has put people in your life, friends in your life that have become like family to you, and that can be energizing to you as well. Number 4, satisfying work. This is another key replenisher for me. I mean, I absolutely love my job. I know not everybody does, but, to come to work here is just energizing. And to work with the people that I get to work with is completely energizing. It's like family, I said to my son, I understand the challenges you have at your job, but like where I work, I mean, I really enjoy what I do, and everybody that I work with is like family. And he goes, well, they are mostly. Our son Jacob Milana Martin and Leslie Hitchcock Martin, we're all like family, and it's energizing. And I hope that you have the kind of job that it's energizing for you too, that when you go to work, it can be energizing. And if it's not, if it's just an energy sucker for you, you need to pray that God would either change your attitude about that job or change you in that job or provide a different kind of a career for you so that you can be in something that when you have to invest 40-ish hours a week there, that it really would be replenishing for you. Another thing would be recreation. Recreation simply means to recreate energy in your inner being. And I don't know what form of recreation that you like. I mean, for some it's reading, for some it's cooking, for some it's golf or fishing or gardening or camping or quilting or something of that nature, that when you do that, it is a replenisher for you as well. And if you don't have any recreation that you enjoy, you certainly need to find something that you would enjoy doing that can be re-energizing for you. And then 6 would be exercise. Yeah, I saved that for last so you wouldn't tune me out. For those who don't like exercise or don't do it, it's probably difficult for you to realize what that can do for you, right? I think we all need to make exercise and diet a significant and regular part of our lives. Good health is valuable. And for you, that might mean walking every day. It might mean running. It might mean lifting weights. It might be getting adequate sleep. Might mean eating healthy foods. Those kinds of things need to become the norm for us. We live in a day and time with these crazy diets. Now, please hear me out before you try to assassinate me. I understand people sometimes get to the point they got to do something drastic, to save their life. Basically, they got to do something drastic. Okay, I get that, but for all of us across the board, these kinds of things just need to be a regular part of our life. We ought to seriously be able to put the junk food restaurants out of business, because that's not really the way we should be eating. So these kinds of things need to become a normal part of our life, and when you're sleeping right and you're eating right, you'd be surprised how much more energy that you have. People who study these things say that just exercising and getting proper rest will increase your energy level by at least 20%. So maybe there's some things that you can do to help yourself physically that can kind of replenish you as well. Now, coming up in just less than 2 months now, I know Christmas was like yesterday and Easter's just around the corner, but around here we do something every year for the 40 days kind of leading up toward Palm Sunday and Easter. And it starts on what people commonly call Ash Wednesday, which will happen to be on Wednesday, March 6th. So from Wednesday, March 6th to Sunday, April 14th, which is Palm Sunday, those 40 days in there, we're going to approach this prayer and fasting thing just a little bit different this time around. We're going to do a series, an all-church series during those 6 weeks there that is called the Daniel Plan. Now, this is not the Daniel fast, so don't try to kill me over that either. I'm not saying you can't eat anymore. This is all about 5 things. It's about faith, food, fitness, focus, and friends. Those are the 5 things that'll be focused on during that time. So we're going to try to help you to learn to eat better, to exercise better, to build some better friendships and things like that. And we've got several things planned during that series. So that's coming up. But those 6 things that I just mentioned, connecting with God and engaging in church and family and satisfying work and recreation and exercise, those are the kinds of things that can replenish you, that can provide replenishing streams to fill up your bucket. So what kind of changes are you going to need to make if you're going to be committed to move from being exhausted to being energized? I would ask you just to consider making a single change. Whatever that might be for you, just be willing to make at least one change immediately. Because depletion has to stop. Exhaustion and overcommitment and overscheduling and all of that has to stop. You cannot allow your bucket to be empty. It needs to stay full. God designed you and desires for you to live life to the full. That's what He says. But most of us probably aren't. Living at the bottom of your bucket or living with an empty bucket is not the life God planned for you. You will be at your best when you live life at the top of your energy bucket. So let me say it one more time. The closer your bucket gets to empty, the easier it is for exhausted you to kick the bucket. But the closer your bucket gets to full, the easier it is for energized you to live life to the full. And I think that's what God designed and desires for all of us. Let's pray. Lord, I would ask that you would give us a desire, some motivation, Lord, to make some changes in life, because most of us in this room, I don't know if it's all of us, but most of us in this room, Lord, are exhausted and depleted, and our buckets, our energy buckets are not full. And the life we're living is not life to the full either. And if you said we could, and that was your intention for us, then Lord, help us to make some changes, to simplify life a little bit, to lead a simple life, a much more simple life. To not be focused on everything such as Martha was, but to be more focused really the way that Mary was, focused on what was truly important, not just on all the things that need to be done. Help us to set some priorities and have some commitments in life that will re-energize us. And I pray that even as we leave here today, we'll know that our energy level is increasing. And tomorrow when we get up and go to work, I pray that that job would even re-energize us as well, and replenish us, and time that maybe we spend with family today or friends, that will replenish us, and how we eat and move and the kinds of things that we do throughout this week, Lord, will replenish us as well. I pray that other people might see something different in us and want to know what's up and why we have energy and they don't, and we'll have the opportunity to share with them, Lord. And I pray for anyone today, Lord, whose hand really isn't in the hand of God, that those people would reach out today and place their faith and trust in you and grab hold of your hand and be hand in hand with you, walking in you and with you, following Christ. And we ask all of these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.